Have you ever paused in the middle of a quiet moment and wondered, if life is this hard, what's the point of it all? If you've asked that question, you're not broken, you're not weak, you're simply awake. Because deep inside all of us, there comes a time when pretending doesn't work anymore, when smiles feel forced, when achievements no longer fill the silence, and something deeper inside whispers, there has to be more than this. This video isn't here to give you shallow comfort. It's here to walk with you into that question, gently, honestly, through the lens of ancient Buddhist wisdom, not to deny life's pain, but to understand it, and maybe, just maybe, to uncover a quieter kind of hope. Let's begin. If life is suffering, why live at all? Have you ever had one of those quiet moments, maybe late at night, after a long, exhausting day, when you pause, stare at the ceiling, and think, if life is this hard, what's the point of it all? If you have, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not weak for asking that question. You're honest. That question, so raw, so vulnerable, is not a sign of despair. It's actually the first flicker of wisdom. It's the moment the soul stops pretending and begins searching. We spend so much of our lives performing, telling ourselves and the world, I'm fine, everything's okay. But deep down, we know when something isn't. We know when life feels heavy, when it feels confusing, when the smiles start to crack at the edges. And in that quiet moment, when we finally admit that we're tired, that we're confused, that we don't understand what this is all for, that's not collapse, that's awakening. It's the beginning of something real. But here's where many people get stuck. They hear a teaching like the one the Buddha gave, life is suffering, and they think, well, great, now I'm really screwed. It sounds hopeless, right? Like life is just pain and sadness, so why even try? But that's a tragic misunderstanding. That's not what the Buddha meant, not even close. See, the Buddha wasn't some grim philosopher sitting under a tree declaring life to be miserable. He was more like a doctor, a deeply compassionate, clear-seeing doctor. And like any good doctor, he began with a diagnosis, not to condemn us, but to help us heal. When a doctor says you have a fever, they're not trying to make you feel worse. They're naming something. They're pointing to what's real, so you can begin the journey to feel better. The Buddha's first noble truth, what many translate as life is suffering, is more accurately described with the word he actually used, dukkha. Dukkha is much richer, deeper than just pain. Yes, it includes physical suffering, like sickness, loss, or disappointment. But more than that, dukkha points to the fragility of life, the wobble, the way nothing ever feels quite secure. Think about it this way. Have you ever had a beautiful moment, a vacation, a romantic connection, the thrill of reaching a long-awaited goal, only to feel it slipping away even while you're in it? You smile, but somewhere in the back of your mind, there's a quiet whisper. How long will this last? That's dukkha. Or maybe you have everything society says should make you happy. A steady job, a loving family, a nice home. And yet, something still feels off. Like you're sitting on a chair with one short leg. Not broken, but just wobbly enough that you can't fully relax. That subtle unease, that sense that life is almost right, but not quite, is the essence of dukkha. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's always there, in the background. And the Buddha didn't say this to depress us. He said it to wake us up. Because if you don't understand the truth of dukkha, you'll keep chasing things that seem like they'll finally make it all okay. The perfect job, the perfect partner, the perfect body, the next trip, the next raise, the next like. And maybe, for a moment, you'll feel whole. But then the wobble returns, and so you chase again. Dukkha is not a punishment. It's not some cosmic cruelty. It's a truth about life. Everything changes. everything ends. And clinging to the idea that it shouldn't, that life should be smooth, predictable, and permanent, is what makes us suffer. This is where Buddhist wisdom becomes not just true, but useful. Because once we understand that suffering comes not just from pain, but from our resistance to pain, then suddenly we're no longer helpless. We can work with it, we can live with it, we can even grow through it. Imagine you're sailing a boat. A storm is coming. One sailor sees the storm and says, "There's nothing I can do," and lets go of the wheel. The boat crashes, he gives up. But the wise sailor, the one who has faced storms before, he doesn't panic. He doesn't curse the sky or throw himself overboard. He simply says, "Ah, a storm." He adjusts the sails, he steadies the wheel, and he rides the waves. Not because the storm isn't real, but because he's learned that fighting reality doesn't make it go away. That sailor is not weak, he's strong. Not because he controls the sea, but because he knows how to move with it. And that's what the Buddha was teaching us. Life has a wobble. That's not a flaw. That's the nature of the ride. And once you stop expecting it to be smooth, you can stop suffering every time it tilts. You can learn to breathe in the chaos. You can learn to soften around the discomfort. You can learn to move with life, not against it. And maybe, just maybe, that's where real peace begins. So if you've ever wondered if life hurts, why bother? The answer isn't in giving up. It's in learning how to live differently, more honestly, more bravely, with your eyes wide open, your hands steady on the wheel, and your heart rooted in truth. The wobble doesn't go away, but your fear of it can. And that might be the most important shift of all. Want to keep going deeper? In the next section, we'll explore the 3 layers of dukkha and how they quietly shape almost every moment of our lives, often without us realizing it. Stay with me. This isn't just philosophy. It's a path back to yourself.
Part 1. The 3 layers of suffering. The nature of dukkha. So now that we understand that the Buddha wasn't being pessimistic when he spoke about suffering, but deeply honest, let's take one step deeper. What exactly is dukkha? Because it's not just about pain. It's about the invisible weight we carry through life, often without knowing why our shoulders feel so heavy. The Buddha spoke of dukkha as having 3 layers, 3 distinct kinds of suffering that touch every human life, no matter where you live or how successful you are. And once you start to see them clearly, something changes. You stop blaming yourself. You stop thinking, "Why am I the only one who feels this way?" You realize, oh, this is simply what it means to be alive. Let's explore each of these layers, one by one. Layer 1, the obvious suffering. This is the kind most people recognize right away. It's the pain of getting sick, the grief of losing someone you love, the sting of failure, the ache of disappointment. Maybe it's the heartbreak of watching a relationship unravel, or the fear that creeps in when a diagnosis changes your life in one sentence. This is the suffering that knocks the wind out of you. It hurts, it's sharp, and it demands your attention. We've all been there, at some point, and when we're in it, it feels like the whole world is on pause, like time itself is holding its breath. But this layer is just the beginning. Because even when those moments pass, there's another kind of suffering that quietly takes their place. Layer 2, the suffering of change. Now this one is more subtle and more confusing. It doesn't come from something bad happening. It comes from something good slipping away. Think about the last time you were truly, deeply happy. Maybe it was the first week of falling in love, or standing on a mountaintop after a long hike, or holding your newborn child for the first time. Moments like those feel complete, timeless, like nothing could ever touch them. But then, they fade. The thrill softens, the excitement dulls, the joy becomes routine. And even if you try to relive it, recreate it, hold on tight, something about it has already changed. The moment is gone. That too is suffering. It's not that happiness isn't real. It is. But our tendency to cling to happiness, to silently beg it to last forever, is what turns even joy into pain. It's like trying to hold sunlight in your hands. The tighter you grasp, the more it slips through your fingers. This is the suffering of impermanence. And it's one of the hardest truths to accept, because it means that even our best days are not exempt from change. Even the things we love most will evolve, shift, or fade. And so, without even realizing it, we carry a constant background hum of anxiety, a quiet voice saying, "Don't let this end, don't let this go, don't lose this." And in trying so hard to protect what we love, we stop actually enjoying it. Layer 3. The subtle suffering of almost. This is the deepest layer of dukkha, and the hardest to name. It's not about a specific pain, and it's not about change. It's the restless unease that lingers even when everything seems fine. You've probably felt it. Maybe your life looks good on paper. You have food, shelter, people who care about you. You've done everything right, and yet something's missing. You can't quite put your finger on it, but it's like sitting on a chair that's just slightly uneven. You're not falling, but you can't fully relax either. That's the third layer of dukkha. It's that quiet discomfort that says, "This isn't quite it. Something should feel different. Why am I still not at peace?" And this is where many people begin to feel broken. They think, "What's wrong with me? I have so much. Why don't I feel happy?" But what if nothing is wrong? What if that feeling, that quiet wobble, isn't a flaw, but simply the way life is built? This is one of the most liberating ideas in Buddhist philosophy. You are not defective for feeling dissatisfied. You are simply human. And instead of trying to fix this wobble by constantly upgrading our lives, new goals, new partners, new phones, new distractions, what if we simply turn toward it? What if we stopped running? A deeper look, what this means for our daily lives. Once you begin to see these 3 layers of dukkha, not just as philosophy, but as your actual lived experience, you start living differently. You stop chasing so much. You stop expecting life to always feel perfect. You begin to soften into the truth of things. Like when you're holding your child and you realize this won't last forever, and because of that, it's even more precious. Or when you're going through grief, and instead of pushing it away, you whisper, "Yes, this too is part of life." Or when everything is fine, but you still feel restless, and you say, "Ah, that's the wobble. It's okay. I don't need to panic." This awareness doesn't take the pain away, but it takes the surprise away. And with that, the suffering softens. A gentle invitation. So I want to invite you not to fix your life, but to see it more clearly. To notice the 3 layers of dukkha, not as enemies, but teachers. They are not signs that you're failing. They are signs that you're awake. And when we begin to relate to life from this place, not of illusion, but of clarity, we can begin to live with more presence, more compassion, and more courage. So the next time you feel that subtle wobble, remember, you are not alone, and there is nothing wrong with you. This is what it means to be human, and it's okay to feel it all. In the next part of this journey, we'll explore what causes this wobble, what lies at the root of our suffering, and why understanding this can quietly transform the way we live.
Part 2. Not giving up. The courage to live with life's unsteadiness. So now we've seen how suffering shows up in 3 layers, from the pain we can name, to the joy that slips away, to the quiet ache of almost. And maybe by now, a question is starting to rise in you. If life is always wobbling, if even the happiest moments can't be held forever, then what's the point? Maybe it's tempting to think, then I'll just stop caring. Maybe there's a voice inside that whispers, if everything changes anyway, why bother trying at all? That voice sounds tired, And it makes sense, because facing the reality of impermanence can feel overwhelming at first. But here's the thing. Buddhism doesn't tell us to give up. It invites us to live with more courage. Not desperate courage, not the kind that grits its teeth and pretends everything's okay, but a quiet, steady courage, one that comes from seeing clearly and still choosing to show up. Let me give you an image. Imagine you're a sailor at sea. A storm is coming. The sky turns dark, the winds rise, the waves begin to crash. Now, what do? A hopeless sailor might see the storm and say, "There's nothing I can do." He lets go of the wheel, gives up on the sails, and waits for the boat to break apart. But a wise sailor? He does something completely different. He doesn't deny the storm. He doesn't pretend the skies are clear. He looks directly at the chaos and says, "This is what's happening. Right now, this is real." And then he acts. He grips the wheel. He adjusts the sails. He watches the sea and responds moment by moment. Not because he can control the storm, but because he's learned to move with it. That is not weakness. That is not giving up. That is living with wisdom. And that's exactly what the Buddha was teaching us. He wasn't telling us to be passive observers of life's pain. He was teaching us to be skillful navigators, people who don't waste energy fighting what is, but instead learn how to move through it with grace. The power of acceptance. There's a powerful misunderstanding in our culture. We often think acceptance means defeat. Like if we accept something hard, we're saying it's okay, or worse, that we're giving up. But in Buddhism, acceptance is not resignation. It's the beginning of freedom. When we accept what's real, not with bitterness, but with clarity, we stop fighting reality. And that gives us our energy back. Think about how much of our suffering comes from resisting what already is. We get sick, and instead of resting, we rage against it. We lose something we love, and instead of grieving, we desperately try to get it back. We feel sad, and instead of feeling the sadness, we blame ourselves for not being stronger. All of that, every bit of it, takes energy. And when we stop struggling against what we can't change, we suddenly have space. Space to respond, space to breathe, space to steer the ship. Acceptance isn't passive. It's a kind of deep intelligence. It's the wisdom that says, "This is where I am, and from here I can choose how to move." Dancing with the wobble. Remember that subtle wobble we talked about earlier, the one that never fully goes away? Life will always have that movement, that uncertainty, that hum of not quite. But when we stop trying to fix it and instead learn to dance with it, everything changes. It's like learning to walk on a suspension bridge. At first, the movement feels unstable, unsafe. But with time, your body learns. You adjust, you sway with it. And eventually, you don't even notice the wobble anymore. It becomes part of the rhythm. That is what life asks of us. Not to force the bridge to stop moving, but to move with the movement. To live fully with the uncertainty. To love deeply, even knowing things will change. That is not weakness. That is courage. That is awakening. A personal reflection. I remember a time in my life when everything felt like it was falling apart. I had just lost someone I loved deeply. My plans, years in the making, collapsed in a single phone call. The future I thought was certain, gone. I remember waking up one morning and thinking, I don't know how to go on from here. But then I remembered something simple. A breath. Just one breath. And I took it. Then another. And in that moment, I wasn't fixing anything. I wasn't solving anything. I was just showing up, exactly as I was in the middle of the wobble. That's when healing began. Not because things got better right away, but because I stopped pretending I needed them to be perfect. I learned to live inside the storm, not as its victim, but as a witness. As someone who was still here, still breathing, still choosing. A question for you. So, let me ask you, what is your storm right now? Where in your life have you been trying to hold the wheel, or maybe letting it go? What would it mean not to give up, but to accept where you are? To pause, to breathe, to look the truth in the eye and say, okay, this is real. What now? Because that moment, right there, is the beginning of something new. It's not the end. It's the shift. It's when life stops being a battle to win and starts becoming a path to walk. Closing thought. So, no, Buddhism doesn't tell us to retreat from life. It tells us to live it more fully, more clearly, to learn the art of navigating change, to hold the wheel with steady hands and an open heart, and, even when the sky is dark and the waves are high, to know that we are still here, still alive, still capable of steering, one breath at a time. You are not meant to escape the wobble. You are meant to dance with it. And in that dance, you may just find the peace you've been searching for all along. In the next part of this journey, we'll dive even deeper into the root cause of our suffering and discover how our minds, not the world outside, shape most of our experience. It's a powerful insight that can quietly change everything.
Part 3. The Root of Suffering, Craving, and the False Self. So far, we've explored the reality of suffering, what the Buddha called dukkha, and learned that life naturally wobbles. It shifts, it changes, it never holds still. And we've also seen how the wise path isn't about resisting that wobble, but learning how to live with it. But now a deeper question arises. If we accept that life is uncertain, why does it hurt so much? Why do we feel so afraid, so anxious, so dissatisfied, even when we're trying to be mindful? Where is all of this coming from? The Buddha gave a quietly revolutionary answer. The root of our suffering is not out there, not in the world, not in our jobs, not even in the people who hurt us. The root is much closer. It's in our own minds. Specifically, he pointed to something called tanha, a word that means thirst, craving, or clinging. It's that restless, constant reaching for life to be different than it is. We crave what feels good. We avoid what feels bad. And when things finally are good, we grasp onto them with all our might, silently begging them not to change. Sound familiar? Like drinking salt water. Craving doesn't look evil. In fact, it often disguises itself as motivation. We say, I just want to feel secure. If I had more time, more money, more love, then I'd be okay. Just one more thing, and I'll finally be at peace. And sometimes we get it. We get the raise. We fall in love. We check the box. And for a little while, the thirst seems to go away. But then, like clockwork, it returns. Stronger, hungrier, more demanding. It's like drinking salt water. It looks like it should satisfy, but the more you drink, the thirstier you become. And so we chase, endlessly. We chase praise, success, comfort, certainty. We run from discomfort, sadness, loneliness, and fear. But the problem isn't that we want happiness. The problem is that we believe happiness is something we can capture and freeze in place. And that belief sets us up for suffering every single time. The sandcastle and the self. To really understand why this craving is so painful, let's look at one of the most powerful metaphors in Buddhist teaching. Imagine you're at the edge of the sea, and you spend your whole life building a magnificent sandcastle. You decorate it with seashells and driftwood, you shape it with care, you protect it from the waves. And this castle, it's not just a project. It becomes you. You say, this is my body. These are my beliefs. This is my career, my family, my status, my story. You pour your energy into maintaining it, improving it, defending it. But deep down, you know something that terrifies you. The tide is always coming. The wind will rise, the sea will shift, the castle will not last. Still, we live as if it will. And that's where the real suffering begins. The three fires. What happens when someone walks by and casually says, "Your sandcastle's not that impressive"? You feel hurt, as if they've insulted you. What happens when a small wave crashes and washes away a corner? Panic, fear, maybe even rage. And all the while, there's this lingering dread of the big wave, the wave of aging, illness, separation, or death. Not because the waves are inherently cruel, but because we've convinced ourselves that the castle must survive. In that clinging, three fires begin to burn inside us. Greed, the desperate urge to build higher walls, gather more shells, add more towers. If I just add more, maybe I can keep it safe. Anger, the frustration we feel toward anything that threatens the castle. Other people, unexpected change, even life itself. Delusion, the refusal to accept that the sandcastle was always meant to return to the sea. These are not just fleeting moods, they are the emotional smoke rising from the fire of attachment. The ocean is not the enemy. Change is not the enemy. The pain comes from our refusal to let go. What this means in everyday life. Think about the last time you felt deeply unsettled. Maybe someone criticized you, and it felt like an attack on your worth. Maybe you saw a wrinkle in the mirror, or got news about your health, and fear flooded your chest. Or maybe you just felt that creeping anxiety when life wasn't going the way you planned. In all of these moments, the castle was threatened, and the fires flared up. But what if, instead of reacting, we simply paused? What if we asked, "What am I clinging to right now? What part of me feels like it's under attack? Am I trying to hold back the tide?" That kind of questioning, gentle, honest, clear, can begin to shift everything. The courage to see clearly. There's a deep kind of bravery in this practice, because it asks us to stop blaming the waves and start looking at how we relate to the castle. It asks us to stop trying to make life permanent and instead learn how to live with impermanence. And that's not easy. But it's freeing. Because the moment we stop clinging to the sandcastle, we begin to experience something else, the vastness of the shore. We see the ocean, not as a threat, but as part of us. We see change, not as an enemy, but as the rhythm of life itself. And we begin to feel lighter. Not because life is suddenly safe or easy, but because we're no longer trying to make it something it's not. Closing reflection. So, if you've been feeling restless, unsatisfied, anxious, even in moments that should feel peaceful, you're not broken. You're just human. And maybe you've been trying to protect a sandcastle. That's okay. We all do. But now you have a choice. You can keep guarding the fragile edges, hoping the tide will never come. Or you can start to soften, to see the waves for what they are, to feel the freedom that comes when the clinging stops. And maybe, just maybe, you'll discover that what you are deep down was never the castle at all. You were the sky, the sea, the stillness beneath it all. In the next part, we'll talk about what happens when those three fires, greed, anger, and delusion, begin to fade, and how the Buddha offered not just a diagnosis, but a path to something profoundly peaceful, the state of Nibbana.
Part 4. Nibbana, the exit from suffering. Let's pause for a moment. We've talked about the pain of craving, the fear of change, the fires that burn inside us, greed, anger, and delusion, each one feeding on our attachment to the self we've carefully built. And now comes a question that lives at the heart of the human experience. Is freedom possible? If we're always chasing, always clinging, always burning, can the fires ever go out? The Buddha's answer was not just hopeful, it was radically empowering. Yes, he said, the fires can be extinguished. There is an end to suffering. And that state, calm, clear, unburdened, is called Nibbana. Not a place, but a state of being. Now, let's clear something up. When people hear the word nirvana or nibbana, they often imagine some heavenly realm, some mystical place you might reach after death if you've been good enough or spiritual enough. But the Buddha never described nibbana that way. Nibbana simply means to extinguish, like blowing out a flame. Not because the fire was bad, but because it has served its purpose and is no longer needed. So what's being extinguished? Not you, not life, but the three fires that have kept you restless and reactive for so long. The fire of craving, that endless more. The fire of anger, that sharp reaction when life doesn't go your way. The fire of delusion, that deep confusion about what you really are. Nibbana is what happens when the heat finally settles, and what's left is peace. The room after the fire. Imagine this with me. You've been living in a room your whole life, but that room has always been on fire. Maybe not raging flames, but a steady burn, a constant heat, a haze of smoke. You run around trying to manage it, opening windows, patching holes, moving furniture. But no matter what you do, the fire is still there. Then one day, the flames go out. Suddenly, silence, coolness, clarity, space. You can finally see what's been there all along. You can breathe, you can rest, you can be. That's Nibbana. Not some cosmic reward, but the natural state of the mind when it's no longer on fire. Freedom in ordinary moments. Now, here's something most people miss. Nibbana isn't something you have to wait for. It's not reserved for monks on mountaintops or sages in distant lands. It's available right here in the midst of ordinary life. Let's say you feel a wave of anger rising. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Your partner says something sharp. A stranger leaves a rude comment online. You feel that heat, tight chest, clenched jaw, boiling thoughts. But instead of reacting, you pause. You breathe. You notice the anger, but you don't let it speak for you. That's Nibbana. Or maybe you're scrolling through your phone and you see something you want, a new gadget, a lifestyle photo, an image of someone's perfect life. You feel that craving tug at you. If I just had that. But instead of chasing it, you smile gently and let it pass. That too is Nibbana. Every time you choose awareness over autopilot, every time you resist the urge to feed the fire, you are tasting a little freedom. The quiet miracle. What's beautiful about Nibbana is how undramatic it is. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It doesn't shout, "You've arrived." It's more like a quiet space opening up inside you, where reactivity used to live. And in that space, something sacred grows. The ability to respond, not react. The strength to feel without being overwhelmed. The clarity to see without distortion. It's like finding still water in a storm, not because the storm has ended, but because you've stopped fighting the wind. Not a final destination, but a living path. One of the most empowering truths in Buddhism is this: you don't need to be perfect to begin. You don't need to become some enlightened being overnight. You don't need to never feel angry, never crave, never forget. You only need to notice and begin again. Each time you choose awareness over habit, that's a step toward Nibbana. Each time you forgive instead of lash out, that's a step. Each time you sit with discomfort instead of numbing it, that too is the path. This is a practice, a rhythm, a returning. You may still feel pain, you may still grieve, still doubt, still fall, but you suffer less because you no longer add fuel to the flame. And eventually, you begin to trust the quiet more than the noise. A personal note. I'll be honest, when I first heard about Nibbana, I thought it sounded far away, too abstract, too idealistic. But then, one day, something shifted. I was in the middle of a conversation that would have normally triggered me. My ego was on alert, my defenses rising. And yet, I paused. I saw it happening in real time, and I chose silence over defense.
I didn't win the moment, I didn't lose it either. I just stayed present. And afterward, there was this calm, like a small candle had gone out in a room I didn't even know was burning. That was a glimpse. Not dramatic, not perfect, but real. And it taught me this. Freedom doesn't come all at once. It comes in moments, tiny, sacred, ordinary moments. Closing reflection. So if you've ever wondered whether peace is really possible, whether freedom is real, I want you to know this. Yes, it is. Not because life stops being hard, but because you stop being consumed by the fire. And what remains is clarity, space, warmth. You don't have to wait for Nibbana after you die. You can taste it here, in your next breath, in your next pause, in your next choice not to feed what burns. The exit from suffering isn't out there. It's already inside you, quiet, patient, waiting. All it needs is your attention. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore the map the Buddha gave us, a practical guide to walk this path with wisdom, balance, and compassion. This is where philosophy becomes practice, and insight becomes transformation.
Part 5. The Practical Map. The Eightfold Path. So far, we've walked through some of life's deepest questions. We've looked at the truth of suffering, not as a punishment, but as a fact of being human. We've traced its roots to craving and the false self. And we've seen the promise of peace, Nibbana, as something not distant or mystical, but profoundly present. But now you might be wondering, how do I actually live this? How do I move from understanding these ideas to actually embodying them in my daily life? The Buddha didn't just give us insight, he gave us a map. A real, practical, grounded way to walk out of suffering and into clarity. That map is called the Eightfold Path. And though it may sound complex, it's actually very simple and beautifully human. You can think of it as a threefold practice, a kind of inner gym for the heart and mind, designed to help you live more wisely, more calmly, and more compassionately. Let's break it down together. 1. Sila, ethical living, integrity of action. The first foundation is ethics, not in a moralistic or judgmental way, but in a deeply practical one. Because, let's be honest, it's hard to have a peaceful mind if your actions are causing pain to yourself or others. This part of the path is about choosing not to harm. It means being mindful of your speech. Are your words kind? Are they honest? Do they build connection or tear it down? It means acting with care in the world, not stealing, not exploiting, not betraying others or yourself. It's not about being perfect. It's about creating conditions in your life that are supportive of peace. When we lie, cheat, gossip, or lash out, we stir up chaos. And that chaos follows us home, lives in our chest, and clouds the mind. So ethical living isn't a punishment, it's a form of protection. It creates stillness in your life so your inner work has room to grow. 2. Samadhi, mental discipline, training the mind. The second pillar is training your attention. Let's face it, our minds are wild. They jump from memory to worry, from craving to fear, from distraction to distraction. It's like living with a hyperactive monkey in your head. And just like we train the body at the gym, we can gently train the mind. How? One of the simplest and most powerful tools is the breath. Just noticing the inhale and the exhale. Not trying to control it, not judging it, just being with it. Each breath is a small weight for the mind, a rep that builds focus, patience, and clarity. And over time, the mind becomes more steady. You start to respond instead of react. You catch yourself in moments that would have once swept you away. This is meditation, not as escape, but as presence. And the more often you return to this space, the more it becomes home. 3. Panya, wisdom, seeing clearly. The third and final layer is wisdom. But this isn't about collecting information or memorizing teachings. It's about intimately knowing your own mind. It means learning to witness your emotions without becoming them. Let's say anger arises. Instead of saying, "I am angry," you begin to say, "Anger is here." You feel it in your body, you see how it tightens your jaw, speeds your heart, but you don't let it speak for you. You just watch it. And in that watching, something magical happens. You create space. And in that space, the fire burns a little less hot. This is wisdom, not in a grand mystical sense, but in the very grounded ability to say, "This is happening, and I don't have to follow it." The 5 hindrances. What gets in the way? Of course, once you start walking this path, you'll notice it's not always easy. The Buddha described 5 natural obstacles that tend to show up as we try to settle the mind. They're like 5 uninvited guests who walk in just as you begin to feel peace. Let's meet them. Sensual desire, the craving for pleasure, comfort, and stimulation. That voice that says, just one more scroll, just one more bite, just one more distraction. Ill will, irritation, resentment, the inner pushback against anything we don't like. The habit of tightening around discomfort. Sloth and torpor, the mental fog, the heaviness, the lack of motivation to practice. That "I'll meditate later" feeling. Restlessness and worry, the racing thoughts, the agitation, the constant mental chatter that won't sit still. Doubt, the voice that says, "This won't work. Who am I kidding? I can't do this." These hindrances are normal. They're not signs you're failing, they're signs you're doing the work. And the way to deal with them isn't to fight or suppress them. It's to recognize them gently. Just name them when they arise. Craving is here. Worry is in the room right now. Doubt is visiting. You don't need to push them out. You just stop feeding them. And when you do, they start to lose their power. The gentle rhythm of practice. This path isn't about perfection. It's not about never getting distracted, never getting angry, never slipping up. It's about learning to see, learning to stay, learning to begin again. It's a rhythm, like waves on the shore. Effort and letting go. Discipline and compassion. You walk the path with humility, with honesty, with a soft, steady heart. And over time, something begins to shift. Not because you've become someone else, but because you're finally becoming yourself. The self that's awake, the self that's kind, the self that remembers to breathe, even when the wind picks up. Closing reflection. So here it is, this beautiful, ancient, practical map. The Eightfold Path isn't a list of rules. It's a way of living, a way of relating to yourself and the world with more care, clarity, and more courage. And you don't have to walk it all at once. You just begin. You take a breath. You notice what's happening. You choose kindness over habit. And when you forget, you simply begin again. This is the path. Not a path of escape, but a path of return. Return to your body. Return to the breath. Return to the simple, sacred truth that you are already whole and always have been. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore what all of this leads to, a life that's no longer ruled by emotion or fear, but guided by clarity, resilience, and love. What does awakening look like in real life? That's where we're going next. Part 6. The result of the journey, a life worth living. So now we've walked through the essence of the Buddhist path, from understanding the nature of suffering, to seeing its root in craving, to touching the possibility of freedom through presence, and finally learning how to live with clarity through the Eightfold Path. But maybe you're still wondering, what actually changes when we live this way? What does all of this inner work lead to? Let's be clear. This path doesn't turn you into some emotionless monk floating through life in perfect serenity. You don't become immune to heartbreak, untouched by fear, or indifferent to pain. You don't become less human. You become more human. But now, something's different. You no longer get swept away by every wave of emotion. You no longer live your life as a reaction to your feelings. Instead, you learn to feel fully, without being consumed. You become the artist of your life. Think of a painter standing before a blank canvas. They don't get to choose every color life hands them. Sometimes they're given dark shades: grief, loss, illness, uncertainty. A victim would throw those colors away, refusing to work with them. But an artist? An artist uses them. They mix them with light. They create texture, depth, meaning. And in doing so, they transform what was painful into something powerful. That's what this path does. It teaches you how to take everything, not just the joy, but also the sorrow, and shape it into something beautiful. A wiser mind, a softer heart, a life that ripples out peace. Holding the pain without breaking. But let's not pretend this path makes pain disappear. It doesn't. It's not a spiritual anesthetic. It doesn't erase grief. It doesn't prevent loss. It doesn't shield you from the fragility of being alive. What it does offer is the ability to be with pain without being broken by it. Imagine this. You're holding a crying baby. A panicked person might try to silence it, shake it, ignore it, run from it. But someone wise, someone grounded, does something different. They pick the child up. They hold it gently. They don't demand the crying stop. They simply offer presence, warmth, breath. That's what this practice teaches you to do, with your own pain. To sit beside it, to hold it like something precious, to offer it space, not shame. And in that presence, something shifts. The pain doesn't vanish, but it softens. It becomes something you can carry, something that no longer defines you, but deepens you. Real loss and the power to stay. Maybe you've lost someone. Maybe you've faced illness, betrayal, or the kind of grief that leaves the air heavy in your lungs. This path won't change the fact that it hurts. And it shouldn't. Pain is real. It deserves to be seen. It deserves to be felt. But what changes is this. You stop running. You stop needing the pain to be different. You learn to be with it, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. And from that place, something remarkable happens. You remember the love behind the loss. You feel more gratitude for the time you had. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, how can I carry this with grace? That's not spiritual bypassing. That's spiritual maturity. You become someone who can hold heartbreak in one hand and still offer love with the other. You become bigger than the pain. Here's the truth. The pain might always live in you, but it no longer lives above you. You become bigger than it, and you begin to use it, not as a reason to shut down, but as fuel to open deeper. You love more fiercely. You listen more fully. You live with the awareness that everything is temporary, and that makes it sacred. Even the ordinary becomes radiant. A sip of tea, the sound of wind through leaves, the warmth of someone's hand in yours. You don't miss life anymore because you're in it, fully, bravely, tenderly. The answer to the first question. Do you remember the very first question we asked on this journey? If life is suffering, why live at all? And now we finally have an answer. You live not to escape the suffering, but to transform your relationship to it. You live to learn, to understand your own mind, to stop causing unnecessary pain to yourself and others. You live to create, to take the raw materials of your joy and sorrow and shape them into something meaningful. You live to love, not perfectly, but honestly, not without fear, but without shutting down. You live because your presence, your stillness, your clarity, your compassion can change the atmosphere of any room you walk into. You live because you've seen what's possible when you stop clinging and start seeing. Final reflection. This moment is enough. This isn't a path of waiting. It's not about becoming enlightened someday. It's about showing up today. For this breath, for this body, for this messy, beautiful, sacred moment. You don't need to be anywhere else. You don't need to become anyone else. Peace begins right here, in the pause between thoughts, in the choice to respond rather than react, in the quiet space where you realize you are already enough, and you always were.
In our final reflection, we'll return to the heart of the path, not as a philosophy, but as a living practice. We'll explore what it means to bring this awareness into daily life, and how the smallest shift can change everything.
Why still choose to live? We've come a long way together. From the question that may have first brought you here, if life includes so much suffering, then what's the point of it all? To the gentle, powerful truths that Buddhism offers. And now, here at the end of this journey, we return to the beginning. But we return with new eyes, wiser eyes, softer eyes. Because the truth is, we don't live to escape suffering. We live to understand it. We live to transform it. And most of all, we live to stop passing it on. Why do we keep living? We live to understand our own minds, to sit beside our fear instead of running from it, to witness our anger without being ruled by it, to meet our grief with presence instead of panic. We live to stop wounding ourselves with the same old habits, to stop replaying the same stories that keep us stuck, to stop believing every thought that tells us, "You are not enough." We live to create space between the trigger and the reaction, between the emotion and the behavior, between the pain and the next step. And in that space, we begin to see clearly. We begin to remember who we truly are. We live to transform our pain. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is what happens when we resist, deny, or fight against what is. So we live to meet pain differently. We stop trying to silence it. We stop trying to fix it. Instead, we listen. We hold it gently. We let it soften us. And from that tenderness, we grow something new. Compassion, patience, wisdom. We begin to realize that our pain can become medicine, not just for ourselves, but for others too. Because the more we understand suffering from the inside, the less we judge it in the world. And that changes everything. We live to offer peace. In a world that's so often rushing, arguing, dividing, we become a presence of calm. Not because we're better, but because we've learned to slow down, to breathe, to listen deeply. We live to carry peace, not in theory, but in practice, in how we speak, in how we move, in how we show up for the people around us. You don't need a grand platform to offer peace. You don't need to be a teacher or a guru. You can offer peace in the way you respond to frustration, in the way you treat someone who disagrees with you, in the way you pause before reacting and choose kindness instead. This is quiet, ordinary courage, and it is world-changing. Not tomorrow, now. Sometimes we think, I'll begin this path when I have more time, when I'm less busy, when I've figured more out. But the truth is, the journey doesn't begin someday. It begins now, with your very next breath, with the next moment you choose awareness over autopilot, compassion over control, presence over distraction. The path is not somewhere else. It's right here, under your feet. It's in how you speak to your child tonight. It's in how you respond to that email tomorrow. It's in how you hold yourself when no one else is watching. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to become someone else. You are already on the path. Every time you choose to walk it with open eyes and an open heart. A gentle invitation. So let me ask you, what if this moment, this very moment, is the perfect place to begin? Not with a huge transformation, not with grand declarations, but with something quiet, simple, real. One breath, one choice, one small act of clarity or care. This is enough. And when repeated moment by moment, day by day, it becomes a life. A life that's not built on avoiding suffering, but on meeting it with wisdom and letting it turn you into someone who brings light to others. You are not alone. Wherever you are on your journey, whether you're just beginning or have walked this road for years, you are not alone. We are all learning how to live in the wobble. We are all figuring out how to stay open, even when it hurts. We are all remembering again and again that peace is not a destination. It's a practice. It's a way of relating to this world with gentleness, with awareness, with love. Closing reflection. So why still choose to live? Because your life, just as it is, holds the possibility of awakening, of kindness, of deep, quiet joy. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are willing to show up, to meet each moment with a little more grace, to move through this world with a little more presence, to live not just for yourself, but as a source of peace for everyone you meet. This is the path. This is the practice, and it begins again, right now. Soft call to action. If this journey has spoken to something in you, something quiet but true, you're warmly invited to stay with us. Subscribe for more gentle guidance on the path of healing, mindfulness, and awakening. And if you feel called to, share your reflection in the comments. What part of this journey touched you most? What's the one breath or one shift you want to begin practicing today? We'd love to walk alongside you. Because in the end, awakening isn't something we do alone. It's something we remember together. Take care of your heart, and thank you for being here.